Who you gonna call? Remco. Let's talk about the Real Ghostbusters Remco merchandise. Welcome back to the Junk Room, everybody. It's me, the Junkman, coming back at you with another video. Today, what are we going to talk about? Well, I should say who we're going to call. We're going to call the Ghostbusters. Now, we all know that Kenner had the rights to the Real Ghostbusters action figure line, but Remco had the rights to some other Real Ghostbusters merchandise. Who is Remco? Well, they mostly did generic like figures or try to rip off He-Man a lot of times, but they did do some more official lines like the Karate Kid action figure line. They were usually the toy companies movie studios went to when Hasbro, Kenner, or Mattel didn't want your toy line. And being that we all hear about the Real Ghostbusters action figures from Kenner, I thought it might be fun to kind of look at these forgotten Remco toys. Now, I'm not going to sit here and explain to you what Ghostbusters is, what the Real Ghostbusters is. Why is it called the Real Ghostbusters? Why ain't it called just Ghostbusters? We all know that, I think. There was a show in the 70s called Ghostbusters, but it had nothing to do with the Bill Murray classic. And then we had the movie and the cartoon, but there was also a cartoon called Ghostbusters about this. It just gets really confusing. The real Ghostbusters are the Ghostbusters. They're the real ones, although they look nothing like the characters in the movie. Again, it can get really confusing, especially if you're not a huge Ghostbusters fan. So let's just get into talking about these forgotten Ghostbusters toys. I know you're probably a big Ghostbuster fan. You're like, what are you talking about? They're forgotten. Me and my friends, we talk about it every week. But this is, for the most part, most people don't really bring up these Ghostbusters toys. And who knows? After looking at these toys, you're probably going to ask yourself, who you going to call?
Ghostbusters!
Ghostbusters. Now, first up is a travel Ghostbusters game, classic 80s style, in water. Now, we didn't have smartphones and we didn't have iPads and stuff like that. And when we went out of town, we had to carry what we could in our pockets to play on the way to where we were going out of town to. Man, most of the time that meant bringing along a water handheld game. Now, I didn't ever have these, but I did have one where you had to shoot the little rings up into the water. I could never do it. And every time I did get one on the ring, my dad would hit a bump and it would have to start all over again. But let's look at one of them now. The Water Challenge Ecto Escape. Using air, you must get the ghost floating around in water back into its coffin. Whew, you better hope your mom don't see this one, because this was back in the 80s when every mother thought the devil was out to get their kid. Well, they made another water game. If that one wasn't fun, you could try this one. Water Challenge Ghost Grabber. Like the package says, it's new. Don't really think they needed to spend the extra money for that logo. This is another water game. This time the ghosts are floating around the water. You have to use the power of the air to put the ghost into the ghost grabber that's located in the center of the game. Whew, that game makes me all wet. That didn't really come out right. Who you gonna call?
The Ghostbusters!
Ghostbusters. Now, we all know handheld games pretty much sucked in the 80s, but at least Remco found a way to make handheld games kind of cool with the Real Ghostbusters line. They did a handheld game. I guess it's considered a handheld game, but it's inside of a pinball, but it's inside a mini pinball machine. So I don't know how good it would be to hold it in your hands, but you probably sit on a desk and play with it like that. The Electronic Pinball Game. Not sure how they came up with that name. That's some genius marketing right there. This handheld game was a mini pinball style machine. It even has real tilt action. That's right, real tilt action. Has dual flippers, because no one wants to play a pinball machine with one flipper. Flashing action lights, 4 different skill levels, and even bonus scoring, 1 to 2 players. Now, if you're into collecting Ghostbusters, this would look really cool set up with your Ghostbusters toys and everything. But they also did another handheld game, and this time instead of making it look like a mini pinball machine, they made it look like an arcade cabinet. Hey, it was the 80s. This one was called the Ghostbusters Arcade Game. Again, I'm not really sure how they come up with these names or who did it, but whoever it was a marketing genius. This handheld game looked like a mini arcade cabinet. In this game, you are Peter, and you have to battle ghosts on a platform above a coffin. You can use items to throw at the ghost, or use a proton thrower on the ghost, or even kick the ghost that's climbing up the platform. Don't worry, Peter can duck inside the coffin for a few seconds to avoid harm. The machine comes with a 4-way joystick. Now that's what I call a joystick. left and right finger buttons. Tell your little sister to put the pad and pencil down because it comes with an automatic scoring system. Also has flashing lights, loud sound effects that can be turned off, and more. They let it be clear you can turn the sound effects off. That was for the parents looking to buy. We're not driving all the way to Tupelo, Mississippi, and here I'm beep, 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 in the back seat, so they could turn the sounds off. Well, that's two Handheld Games that's kind of done in a different style. But don't worry, they did the classic Handheld Games too. Before we take a look at that, we're going to have to ask you a question. Who you going to call? Them there Ghostbusters. Now let's look at the first of the Real Handheld Games. This one was titled Real Ghostbusters Handheld Game. Again, marketing geniuses. This is probably the rarest of the Ghostbusters Remco items. You play as Peter at the firehouse, and you have to battle ghosts that's trying to land on the bottom of the screen. All you need to do is shoot them. The ghosts come down one at a time, but they will move faster as the game goes on. How many times did you fall for these little handheld games? Tiger was the king of making us fall for them. You saw them at the store, you're like, I gotta get me a Tiger game. I've got to get that game in a handheld. It's horrible, wasn't it? I don't think I ever played one that was fun, or if it was fun, it wasn't fun more than 3 or 4 minutes. Hate these handheld games. Well, there was one more from the Ghostbusters Remco line. This one was titled Trap the Ghost Handheld Game. Well, at least getting a little bit more creative with the names now. This is the most common of the handheld games, and it looks just like the other one. And again, you're Peter. Someone needs to tell Remco there was more characters than just Peter. Anyway, you're Peter, and again, you have to battle ghosts as they're trying to land at the bottom of the screen. Okay, this is just the same game, other than now they gave it a title, and instead of standing in the firehouse, you're now standing on a street. Basically the same game, and I can guarantee, although I never played them, both of them's probably not fun at all. Unless you're some big Ghostbusters fan, you'd probably love them, but then I would have to ask you, who you gonna call? Now let's look at the last of the Remco items, and this is the best. I always try to say the best for last. A real Ghostbusters working telephone. The real working telephone. They didn't want you to think this was some toy. This phone looked like the Ghostbusters logo, and it came with everything a young kid needed back in 1988. Pulse or tone switch, redial memory, the ringer could be turned off or on, it had a privacy mute button, and a nice, long, 6-foot cord. We're talking classic twisty phone cord. Now I'm not sure how fun this phone was to talk on, but it sure does look cool. A similar phone with a logo only at the top was seen in the Remco catalog, but I couldn't find that it ever got released. That's a cool looking phone right there. Looks like the type of phone you would see hanging up at your local video rental store. You know, those cool stores before Blockbuster showed up and closed the mom and pop stores down, where you could go in and they would know you by name and they would know what kind of movie you would like. They would like, here, watch this. Oh, the good old days. Now, Blockbuster's gone also. You just go through that horrible menu system on a streaming service. Who you gonna call? Well, that's a look at the Remco Ghostbusters merchandise. I wasn't sure if you guys out there kind of want to touch on some things that maybe you guys have forgotten about, or you can be like, hey, I had that as a kid. Blew my mind. That's always one goal I have for this channel, is to show you some old toy and make you say, oh, I forgot all about that. Did you have the handheld games? Which one did you have? Were they boring as they look, or am I wrong? Were they a lot of fun? Did you play them for 6 hours straight? Well, maybe you even had that phone and you talked to your honeys all night long on it. Well, let me know that and more in the comments below. And always, thumb up so you like my content, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk again soon.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.